Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. The Manchurian Candidate is the name of a political thriller movie based on the 1959 novel of the same name by Richard Condon. It's about the son of a prominent U.S. political family who has been brainwashed into being an unwitting assassin for the Communist Party. But is it possible to brainwash or program someone to kill? Are some secret intelligence organizations using mind control to turn unwitting participants into patsies, spies, and assassins? We'll meet several researchers who believe not only is it possible, but that Manchurian candidates have been created through covert programs like MKULTRA, Projects Artichoke and Bluebird. We'll learn that infamous triggermen like Oswald, Sirhan, Mark David Chapman, even bombers such as Timothy McVeigh and Ted Kaczynski may have all been programmed assassins. And tonight's skeptic will weigh in ready and willing to refute all of these claims. Me? I just want the truth, and I'm willing to follow the truth wherever it leads. It is time to redefine reality. Genetic enigma or a human alien hybrid? That's how cynical I am now about the process. Is it possible technology can alter weather patterns created by the has been engineered by the Illuminati?
There's no doubt.
I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina to meet with an author and researcher, and he's going to tell me about the shadowy men behind some of the most famous assassins and triggermen in history. Jerry, welcome to The Conspiracy Show. Of course, we refer to the programmed assassin now as Manchurian Candidates, which comes from the 1959 book by Richard Condon and the subsequent movie in 1962. Right. How did Condon know about this stuff?
Well, it makes you wonder if he had high-level friends or not, because he predicted, after this novel came out and then the movie came out, everyone thought that he had inside information that he must have because the parallels were so obvious. For example, he predicted that in the movie, the plot of the movie is that an American soldier would go behind enemy lines in a communist country and be programmed through mind control, return to the United States, and kill an American president who was deemed soft on communism.
The details of the plot and the specifics of Manchuria are actually in CIA documents 5 years before the book came out.
Richard Condon's novel, The Manchurian Candidate, based on your experience, your research, how accurate is that?
Well, supposedly it's a work of fiction, but the most interesting fact about it is prior to the movie and the book being released late 50s, early 60s, more in about the 1954 timeframe, there's an internal CIA memo from one officer to another, basically lining out the plot. And so these two people are concerned that a group of GIs were going through a zone in Manchuria, were captured by communist Chinese, and subjected to some sort of interrogation, mind control, brainwashing, and have amnesia for a period of time in Manchuria.
What is a Manchurian Candidate?
In short, a Manchurian Candidate is a military programmed assassin whose brain has been partitioned like a computer in such a way that he can act, and after his actions he can forget and not know what he did.
There was a memo from the 1950s where the CIA had proposed taking a defector and brainwashing him into committing an unwitting assassination against an American official if necessary. And then this assassin would be disposed of while in police custody following the crime. And that turns out is exactly what happened to Lee Harvey Oswald when he killed an American official named John F. Kennedy and was disposed of in front of the entire world in the basement of the Dallas City Jail the next day.
What was the CIA's interest in killing JFK and having Johnson take over? What was their motivation for carrying that out? If they wanted to assassinate a public figure, why wouldn't it have been Nikita Khrushchev?
Is it possible they thought Kennedy was too soft on Cuba?
Given that he's generally considered to have won the Cuban Missile Crisis, I don't see how. If you have such an excellent assassination technique, why did we then have the Bay of Pigs? If we could have neatly taken out Castro with no one suspecting, why would we not have done so?
There's probably more Manchurian candidates than not in office, if I had to guess, including Obama, but I can't prove it. And Obama came out of nowhere. He's got no past, he's got no documents, etc. And all of a sudden he's head of the free world.
It's alleged that Ronald Reagan was taken out and assassinated with a second gunman, and a clone, a double, was put in his place. So Manchurian candidates can be used not only for assassins, but to be politicians and stand in for politicians and their doubles. Research involved using test guinea pigs and giving them drugs, LSD and other drugs, and other sensory deprivation exercises in order to partition the mind and to disassociate the person from their body.
What is your definition of a Manchurian Candidate?
A Manchurian Candidate is an artificially created multiple personality where the person's subjected to a whole bunch of procedures, including hypnosis, and a new personality is created. So the out front person has no knowledge of the assignment or the activity of the implanted personality who's controlled by a handler.
As part of the research for this book, I did a whole study on brain implants, and I mean, this has been published for decades. They've been using brain implants for various medical reasons, so there's no reason why they couldn't also use it for nefarious purposes as well, to create some kind of a state that would allow people to be more susceptible to hypnosis or drugs or combinations thereof.
Where did the CIA learn how to do this?
The CIA learned this from a series of projects and a series of experts. One of the leading ones is George G.H. Estabrooks, and he has, I guess from 1943 to 1971, a series of publications, including a well-known textbook on hypnotism.
He wrote many books on the subject and articles, and actually described creating concentric personality structures in soldiers and people. One of the personalities would be a rabidly pro-communist personality that would be used to infiltrate suspected pro-communist groups or groups that the CIA wanted to discredit.
Research involved using test guinea pigs and giving them drugs, LSD and other drugs, and other sensory deprivation exercises in order to partition the mind and to disassociate the person from their body.
Is it possible to hypno-program someone to kill?
I find it difficult to credit that you could cause another human being to act so against their instincts and yet release them into society and nobody would notice.
We're talking about an unwilling or unwitting participant who is recruited unknowingly, I suppose, by the CIA. Is that correct?
Sort of a combination of witting, unwitting, I think, in the Manchurian Candidate programs, in that it's usually a military person, and they're approached and said that you're either going to participate in or you have the opportunity to volunteer for a program. So I imagine there's some degree of consent kind of up front, but they don't really know what they're getting into. And then once they're conditioned, they have amnesia for all of the conditioning.
MKULTRA is the kind of the umbrella term used for decades of CIA experiments on American citizens and even in the international community. They explored every avenue known to man that could potentially control human behavior.
Obviously you have to have control of the person. There's hypnosis, interrogation procedures, sensory deprivation and isolation.
Electroshock, LSD, all kinds of drugs, hypnosis, etc. Anything that could be used to control people and control behavior. And I believe that the that the program went operational and was used and is being used throughout the world.
Oh, MKUltra is certainly going to this day, and the recent assassination in Arizona was done by a Manchurian Candidate.
With all the documentation released from CIA on MKUltra, certainly they were experimenting with it. Is it possible they're lying about their complete and utter lack of success with MKUltra? Of course it's possible. But why would it benefit them to claim an utter failure and shut down the program if it had been working?
The CIA director at the time, I believe it was Woolsey, testified that MKUltra had been shut down. Do you believe that was the case?
MKUltra is used in two senses. There's the actual specific project MKUltra that ran from 1954 to 1963 and then was shut down. And then it in turn was rolled over into MK Search, which ran until 1972. And MKULTRA was preceded by Bluebird and Artichoke, so there's a series of documented programs.
The documents I've read, again, public information, they outline several goals. One is to remove any moral compunction to killing another human being, and that failed miserably. Another was to make soldiers or operatives almost suicidally brave, and while the former succeeded, the latter didn't. I can't say that they succeeded in either goal. If they had, the information wouldn't be public and the program might still be continuing.
When Congress started to investigate it, they claimed that they had never actually made any progress and that they had actually destroyed all the documents, so we don't really know.
Since then, you've had a change of heart in American politics and in the intelligence community both, and it's whether you attribute that to morals or just a complete lack of viability, it seems to have been completely shut down.
The whole purpose of the Manchurian Candidate is not to get them to do something, it's so that they have amnesia, so that the person's resistant to interrogation and can be a very convincing sleeper.
Do you think that mind control techniques could be used on an unwilling participant for other objectives rather than murder? Let's say to use someone as some sort of a mule, a spy who could deliver information to another agent without knowing what they were carrying.
Why would you need mind control when chances are you can find someone who's perfectly willing to do it without?
Really, there's no particular limit to the skill that the implanted personality can have or the type of mission that he can conduct.
Certainly people act as mules all the time.
Anything from surveillance, penetration, document retrieval.
Certainly people act as intelligence officers and intelligence agents all the time.
Recruitment of subjects or assassinations or any other military function. So you can recruit a soldier, recruit any civilian, put them through training and get them to go shoot the enemy, infiltrate, penetrate. None of these things are amazing or different from normal. The whole purpose of the Manchurian Candidate is not to get them to do something, it's all about the amnesia. Creating the amnesia so that the person's resistant to interrogation and can be a very convincing sleeper.
I really don't know what the situation is about. Nobody has told me anything except that I'm accused of murdering a policeman. I know nothing more than that.
Why wouldn't they just hire a professional hitman or a mobster to do it? Wouldn't that be easier?
It wouldn't, because they have a lot of enemies, and if their enemies get control and kidnap the actual assassin, they can deprogram them.
What about John Lennon's killer, Mark David Chapman? Any signs there that he may have been programmed to kill?
Oh, certainly. Mark David Chapman, as the records show, shows that he once again had military associations through his family and was mind-controlled and set up as an assassin of Lenin.
Mark David Chapman fits the profile a little bit in that he did travel around extensively. He was in Beirut and other locations. Whether that was under just normal, conventional, civilian kind of framework, or that was all cover for training abroad.
What about the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski? Any evidence that he may have been a programmed killer?
Oh, the DC snipers, Kaczynski, all the John Doe 1 and 2s, McVeigh at Oklahoma, they're all come out of the same, cut from the same cloth. They're all part of Tavistock's MKULTRA military assassination program.
Is there a triggering mechanism, like in the movie The Manchurian Candidate? The phone rings and someone on the other line says, "Why not pass the time with a little solitaire?" Or is that a Hollywood depiction?
The triggering mechanisms are described in great detail in the CIA documents. Can include verbal instructions, tones or signals over the phone, hand signals. Really, there's no limit to the type of signal that can be used.
So yes, there are definitely triggers, and depending on how good the hypnotist is and how willing the subject is, that they can definitely bring them in and out of the hypnotic state without anyone knowing.
Following the assassination of John Lennon.
Right.
He basically stood there, waited for the police. He had the well-thumbed copy of Catcher in the Rye in his hip pocket. His behavior seems rather almost robotic, which would tend to suggest some sort of mind control.
The Catcher in the Rye, I've heard that popular theory before, you know, the Book of Assassins. Hinkley was carrying a copy as well. Whether Hinkley was emulating Chapman or whether it's coincidence, I still can't credit that with brainwashing. You will assassinate this figure, and by the way, buy yourself a copy of Catcher in the Rye. Why would anyone institute that program?
But what about these cases of mass shootings, mass murders, like the Virginia Tech shooter? Are they displaying the symptoms of a mind control victim?
When we have a mass shooting, such as Fort Hood or at Virginia Tech, I would follow the same procedure. Okay, this may be just a lone nut. This may be some sort of political group or agitated group of some kind with no mind control, or this could be a Manchurian Candidate.
If he were a Manchurian Candidate programmed by an intelligence group, what would be the motive? Why would they be targeting innocent civilians?
The first thing I would want to do, which I did, was get the names of all the victims, all the professors, and then look at what kind of research they were involved in. What was their background? Were any of them military contractors? Were any of them political radicals? So could one of them be a target and the rest is collateral damage? Or some sort of stirring up unrest and fear to promote either the war on terror or greater control of the populace by the government?
Create commotion as a way of keeping control. And so they're attacking the nation states with assassins and terrorism as a way of strengthening their power.
I think a simpler explanation would be mental illness. I would credit that before brainwashing. Clearly, you cannot be a well-adjusted member of a society and assassinate a political figure.
When Oswald was interviewed before he was shot, obviously,
Right.
and Sirhan both either claimed to have no knowledge or no memory. Sirhan didn't deny that he perhaps shot Bobby, but claimed he had no memory of the incident. They seem to be genuine on the surface.
We will always have sociopaths or simply the mentally ill, some of whom are violent. That doesn't strike me as brainwashing. That strikes me as someone who's completely unaware of consequences. I think a simpler explanation would be mental illness. I would credit that before brainwashing. Clearly, you cannot be a well-adjusted member of a society and assassinate a political figure.
Well, the ordinary person, Richard, is taught to believe that history happens by accident, but the upper echelons know that history is planned. As researchers, we examine and talk from court documents. We don't give our own opinion. And there's so many documents available on the internet that allow people to see what was really going on. All they have to do is scratch the surface and go after them.
I don't know if you've heard of Operation Mockingbird, which was the CIA's program to infiltrate the mass media, to plant disinformation and discredit conspiracy theorists about its own operations, etc. And they actually mention in the documents, this came out in the 1970s when, along with the MKULTRA experimentation, that the CIA had heavily infiltrated all the major news organizations in the US and internationally, and that they had actually mentioned conspiracy theorists around the JFK assassination that should be discredited because they could be helpful to the enemy, so to speak.
With normal military training, you can get somebody to do just about anything, including atrocities and killing civilians and so on. And if you add on hypnosis and Manchurian Candidate procedures, you can get anybody who's a good subject to do just about anything and not remember it. There's no doubt about this. This is well established.
In his book, The Perfect Assassin, physicist and researcher Jerry Leonard exposes the curious parallels between a proposed CIA experiment in mind control and the events surrounding the murder of JFK. Project MKULTRA was a code name for a covert CIA mind control and chemical interrogation research program run by the Office of Scientific Intelligence that began in the early 50s and continued until at least the late 1960s. There is much published evidence that the project involved the surreptitious use of many types of drugs as well as other methodologies to manipulate individual mental states and to alter brain functions. So, is it possible assassins such as Oswald, Sirhan, John Hinkley, or Mark David Chapman were programmed? Once hypnotized, the theory goes, a programmed assassin can be made to perform heinous and treasonous acts via remote control, a triggering word or phrase over the telephone, for example. And then there is this notation from a 1960 CIA study on brainwashing, and I quote, "We know now that men can be made to do almost anything. It's all a question of finding the right means. We can make him kill his parents and eat them in a stew." Think about that. And now, I'd like to know what you think. You can contact us through our website, www.theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid.